الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين
الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everybody, and welcome back to Rosy's Corner. Today, we are starting a new series called Mind, Iman, and Mental Health. Sorry, I kind of blanked out a little bit there. And today, we have a special guest. I'm going to let her kind of do a little introduction so she can kind of tell you guys a little bit about herself, her credentials, and all. But here we have Dr. Hannah.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. So, a quick correction: I'm a PA, not a physician. We both practice medicine, but a bit of a distinction. So, to give a brief introduction, again, my name is Hannah. I am a physician associate practicing medicine in Michigan. I practice urgent care medicine and primary care. I also have a coaching company where I offer trauma coaching to Muslim women, and I also do something called biohacking coaching, which is something, if you want to talk about at any point, we can discuss. But today's episode will be more so about the mental health aspect of what I do. I established my company in 2021, alhamdulillah, and have been working with it ever since. I do content creation as well. I have my own YouTube channel as well as a TikTok account and Instagram account where I share short form and long form videos all about God conscious self improvement, and that includes a bunch of mental health stuff as well. So yeah.
Well, welcome. We love having you here, and I'm so excited for this series.
Mhm.
So to start off, I kind of wanted to ask, what made you start wanting to help people with like mental health, and
Mhm.
like what got you into your field?
Yeah. So, very good question. So, it was a very selfish endeavor. I was doing it for myself because I was someone who was struggling very much with my mental health for many years. For 2 decades of my life, I was dealing with chronic depression and chronic anxiety of varying degrees. So I tell people I had the depression that made you eat more, eat less, sleep more, sleep less. I feel like I've experienced every aspect of it except for psychotic depression. It really took a toll on me in my early mid 20s. That's kind of where everything came to a head, and it started actually leading to full blown health issues for me. So I started developing panic attacks. I developed a migraine disorder, and if you don't know what a migraine disorder is, migraines, people think that they're just headaches, but they're not just headaches. They're headaches that well beyond what we would typically expect of symptoms, from you experiencing nausea, or your pain worsening when you look at lights or hear voices or hear sounds. We call that phonophobia and photophobia in medicine, to literally getting nauseous, like you're about to vomit, and some people will actually throw up. So it's not a fun time. I kept getting sick. I literally, like, I was someone who very rarely would get sick. If I would come down with a cold maybe once a year, if that. And all of a sudden, 4 times back to back, I had gotten really sick, and I even landed in the hospital in the emergency room because my lung was inflamed. I developed something called pleuritis, and the bottom of my lung collapsed. And I was just like, yeah, I was just like, my body is reacting to all of the stress from the depression and anxiety. And maybe I was able to cope with it for a very long time, but now, halas, everything was exploding at that point. So now it was time for me to just dive in and be like, okay, what do I need to do to figure this out? I was studying medicine at the time, so I was very high achieving. I called myself a functional depressive. Alhamdulillah, I'm not experiencing that anymore. Hence why what we're talking about actually works, alhamdulillah. But you wouldn't look at me and think that I was dealing with all of this. And that's kind of what actually made it suck a little more, right? Because it's like now you're having to uphold this expectation of what people see you doing and deal with the what you're actually experiencing.
It's crazy the thing the stress can do to your body. I have dealt, like, after my son's passing, I dealt with so much stress. I even got to the point, I think it was like 2 years after he had passed, I was
Mm.
experiencing all of the pregnancy symptoms. Like
Wow.
all of the pregnancy symptoms to the point where I was having contractions. Like I
Oh.
had to go to the hospital and I was
Mhm.
having contractions. I didn't know what was going on. And they you know that thing that they put on so that they can time the contractions and all that, and see,
Mhm.
they put that on me and they're like, "You're having contractions like right." I'm like, there's like no way that I'm pregnant or anything. So like,
Yeah.
how? And so what they explained to me, it's kind of like phantom pain, like when
Mhm.
somebody's leg it gets taken off, right?
Mhm.
Um you ask them like, "Where's the pain?" They'll say, "In my leg," but the leg is not there.
There.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's the way that they explained it to me, and I was like, "What?"
Mhm.
And, like, everything, I felt it in a matter of 2 weeks. All of the pregnancy symptoms, matter of
Mhm.
2 weeks, and they're like, "It's the stress."
Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"What?"
Yeah. So a lot of people don't understand, right? And I mean, I have a really strong background in anatomy and physiology. So you think of it in the way that our nervous system, which is comprised of our brain, our spinal cord, and all the nerves that come out of it, that's a body system that is connected to every organ of your body. Is connected to your heart, connected to your gut, your stomach, and intestines, and your liver, your muscles, everything.
I have a
And
lot of stomach
so
issues
when we
because
are
of it.
yeah, yeah. And when you are experiencing stress to that extent, your brain, which is where your mind is, right, is going to react, and when it reacts, it releases chemicals, neurotransmitters, and hormones, other types of chemicals, and those chemicals travel, right, in each their unique way, and then have an effect on the organ. So you will experience symptoms as a result of it. And yesterday, actually, I was on another podcast, and the podcast host asked me, he's like, "How do people know if they have experienced trauma specifically?" And because right, 'cause he was almost like getting at like, a lot of people are saying that they do, and how are we supposed to figure it out? Like, what if they're just overreacting kind of thing? And I was like, their body will tell them. Your nervous system will tell
Yeah.
you. You were experiencing something called psychosomatic symptoms. Psycho up here, meaning it is your brain creating the symptom and then presenting it in your body. And that's how a lot of people present. And then we figure things out and we're like, there's nothing like wrong in terms of you don't, you're having chest pain, but you're not having a heart attack. What else could it be? Oh, it could be that your anxiety is literally spiking your cortisol and your adrenaline level to the point that your blood vessels in your lung are constricting and you're having a harder time breathing. So now what do? We address the anxiety.
Yeah, wow. To me, it blows my mind the way that our body works, and, like, this is why I say you
Mhm.
can't deny, like, that we have a creator and everything, just because the way that everything works, it's just, it's mind-blowing to me.
It's so insane.
So I did ask a couple of people that I know
Mhm.
like deal with mental health to kind of ask some questions so that they
Mhm.
can kind of get a response from a professional.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that they asked was, when helping someone with their mental health, is there anything you need to look out for or any signs that can help you help them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this is more so that on the topic of if you're okay, so you're not someone who's professionally trained in anything, but you know a friend, a family member, someone who you love who experiencing mental health issues. If I had to give a few tips to you, it would be first and foremost know your limits, right? Be very mindful about advising them to do one thing or another if you don't have the evidence or the background in it. I know sometimes that's what we perceive as helping is giving advice. But sometimes our advice might be misleading, right? You might be telling someone to do something that is not actually working, or within their context and their circumstances would worsen their symptoms, right? That's one. Number two is you always want to do kind of like an assessment of how bad things are really for them. So this would be almost a sense of, I know it's going to sound crazy, right? If you have a friend who's down bad, like they're really, really going through it, you can ask them a question along the lines of, and I can't say it exactly because I don't want your like YouTube channel to be flagged or anything, but
Listen,
are
we've
you
said some crazy things on here.
Yeah, but
So
if you can, I don't wanna I don't wanna add to the flags for you. Are you planning do you have any thoughts of hurting yourself, right?
okay,
If
gotcha.
someone's having those types of that type of thinking, that should raise your red flag to like, "Oh my god, this is something really serious," and you need to provide them with the resource of like, "If you ever get to the point where you are going to do this, call me, go to the hospital," right? We always tell people, "Call 911, go to the ER," right?
Do
And
you think that people are honest though when
a
you
lot
ask them?
you would be surprised actually statistically in a situation like that, because a lot of times it is a cry for help, people are willing to be honest. People are
Okay.
will and you will be shocked. In fact, we are trained to ask the question outright, not just are you planning on hurting yourself, but are you planning on
Yeah.
yourself, right? Straight up. And the person just kind of looks at you, and then they'll tell you like a yes, and then you ask, do they have a plan or whatever. This is mental health first aid, basically. But the point of that is not for you to assess to fix, it's for you to assess so you give them a path of like, if you have these thoughts, call me. So they know there's a person who's safe for me to go to,
Yeah.
and we will get you to the ER. Because at that point, when you get to that point in your brain, like we need medications to restabilize things, because that's not a normal place to be for anyone. So I would say that's number 2. And number 3, if it's not there and it's just they're going through a hard time, they're dealing with depression, they're dealing with anxiety, be an empathetic ear. You would be amazed at how effective just someone being able to speak to you about things. It's like just them being able to open up, this is what's going on, and feel your support and presence can be an enough of what they of what you provide. You don't have to be a superhero, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Um, how has your experience been helping others with mental health?
it's a good question. Alhamdulillah, it's been beautiful. I do my trauma group coaching program, and I launched the first cohort in August, and it's been amazing. Alhamdulillah. I have the women I work with have grown so in the program. So just to give you guys a brief overview of the program, it's a 10-week program that is 2 hours each, and in it they are being taught. They're being educated on trauma, what it is, how it operates through the nervous system. They're being taught specifically evidence-based techniques on how to process trauma, meaning how do we know scientifically our body does this and how do we get our body to do that. They're being taught the intersection of trauma science and Islam, which is something that is very lacking, because our dean gives us a very good framework on how to operate when we're experiencing trauma. And a lot of people don't realize it. And when you finally know the science of it, you're like, "Oh my god, that makes sense," right? It's almost like there's this is an example of just science overlapping with Islam and vice versa. The Prophet ﷺ used to say, when you eat in thirds, right? One third food, one third water, one third air. Well, then the science comes out and it's like, oh, if you leave some air in your stomach, your digestion is much better. You're much less likely to get constipated or bloated. You decrease the blood sugar spike, right? If it's a whole like host of scientific evidence for this kind of thing. Same thing with trauma. So with that being said, that's what the program is. These women have grown so much because now they know what's going on. They have the awareness. 2, they can identify for themselves exactly what it is they need to do to process. We do inner child healing. We do somatic sensory processing. If they want supplement or medication recommendations, I, as a medical provider, can actually offer them the advice and guidance on that. We have the community in there, which is co-regulating. And a lot of people don't realize our brains are actually, we have something called mirror neurons, which are these special cells in our brain that actually specifically mirror another person's behavior. So it's why when you walk into a room and you see everyone's like anxious or angry or upset, you automatically are like, and then you start to mimic that. You might not realize it. So it's why you're smiling and I'm smiling. Because if I had an attitude and I was rude right now and I was like, whatever, I don't want to be here, you would alter your approach,
Yeah.
but it would be subconscious. It's those neurons firing off, right? Because they're meant to, yeah. So that community they're mirroring each other. And so when one person's like, this is what happened to me this week, and I'm so proud of myself for being able to make it through because I used this technique that Hannah taught us. The other people are like, oh my god, this is what I did. This is how. And then the Islamic discussions are absolutely amazing. If anyone is if you're a woman who's interested in it, and I think we'll put the comment section and we'll put the link in the comment section to look at all the information, inshallah. But it's been awesome. I also do it in my practice with patients. That's a different approach because that's the very medical model, right? So a lot of that is medication type stuff.
Okay, and that actually brings us to our next question. Is getting psychiatric treatment, so like medications, considered
Mhm.
haram? Because I actually haven't read anything about this, but this was actually asked by somebody who's a non-Muslim.
Gotcha, gotcha. So no, it is absolutely not haram. In fact, in situations, it would actually be the greater good to do. So psychiatric treatment, right? When we're talking about medication specifically, right? Because there's a whole host of different things that can be done to treat your mental health. I am never opposed. I practice medicine. I'm never opposed to the administration of medication to modify certain things. And in certain conditions, things like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, things of that sort, the
Like you read
symptoms.
my questions.
Ah, no, no, subhanallah. Um, in those s- issues, being unmedicated can actually be dangerous because a person can have a psychotic episode or a manic episode and then do things that are actually very harmful to themselves or other people. So it's not haram, and everything comes with risk when it comes to medication. This is why you sit with the psychiatrist or psychiatric PA or psychiatric NP and have the discussion. This is what's going on. They do a thorough history of what's like, let's make sure it's nothing else, right? Like, let's not just assume it's depression. Let's make sure it's not your thyroid. Let's make sure it's not your iron levels. Let's make sure it's not that you have sleep apnea. And then from there, they will prescribe the appropriate medication. You have close follow-up. They'll check to make sure everything's going on. And my advice is always going to be, if you are on medication, you should always be seeking other ways as well to develop coping mechanisms and skill sets so that so that you have that to build your resilience, because medications are we dose them up, you know, and some people want to be off of them.
Yeah.
So I don't prescribe medication in my coaching. Well, I can't actually because it's not a clinic. That would be illegal. If you, but a lot of my clients actually are like, this is my last resort to avoid medication.
Okay. Wow. All right. Also, if anybody has any questions, please send them in the comments. I know the ticker at the bottom says super chats, but for this live, it does not have to be a super chat. By all means, please ask questions. We want to answer any questions that you guys may have on mental health or anything that connects to mental health in Islam. So our next question is, what is the best way to deal with mental health issues like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, social identity disorder without the use of medication?
So I'm going to have to approach this from the medical model, right? Again, because the severity of the symptoms is so intense, and the danger. So you guys might not. Okay, let me actually break this down. What's schizophrenia? What's bipolar disorder? What's social identity? I think they meant dissociative identity disorder. There's no social identity disorder. So
What I was explained about social identity disorder, it's kind of like I think they like supposedly renamed it.
mm,
It used to be the multiple personality disorder.
so it's called dissociative identity disorder.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So schizophrenia is a particular medical condition where the symptoms present as hallucinations and delusions. And the hallucinations meaning they're seeing and hearing things that aren't there. And this is not jinn possession. This is something different because we can actually see it on a brain scan, and there's a genetic component to it. And these people, what ends up happening is they will have what are called positive and negative symptoms. So positive is in addition of something. Delusions, meaning they have deluded thinking. They're thinking things are happening that are not really happening. People have intentions that they don't really have. Someone's stalking me. Someone's hunting me down. There are aliens that are spying on me through my computer, kind of thing. Then negative symptoms, they have what we call a blunted affect, or basically they lose the ability to show emotion. This is because there's actual damage going on in the brain. So that's schizophrenia. Bipolar disorder is a range of two different types, where a person will have episodes of significant depression, then all of a sudden the depression will lift and they'll go into something called a manic state or a hypomanic state, meaning they're not just okay, they're like beyond beyond normal motivation, and these people will be like talking really fast, and will like stay up for nights on end and things like that. So it's like their brain just shot up from depression to mania. And then dissociative identity disorder is a condition where a person basically develops multiple personalities, always as a result of significant trauma, usually childhood trauma. We tend to see in people who were like sexually abused as children, and it's their brain's protective mechanism. We are going to create another personality to deal with what's going on. And so that one is an interesting one because it's very, very, very rare. And now people are popping up saying that they have it, and we don't know if they're just chasing clout, but there are people that actually have been like actually diagnosed with it. So with that being said,
Is there like a way to see if that's a thing? Because since it's supposed to be like you create
mhm,
somebody just in your mind, is there a way to see that on a
yeah.
scan or anything like that?
You probably could see it on a brain scan because certain parts of the brain would essentially go offline and another part would pick up. I don't know. Because DID is so rare. I don't know much about the data on the imaging. I do know a lot more about schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. I'm sure you could, but the thing about it is that they're thoroughly researched by psychiatrists, and when you're there, like the big thing is that when a trigger comes out, something will happen and the person will kind of switch. And so some people don't even know it. And there's actually, if you guys are interested in it, there's actually a woman who has it who's very like frank about it, and she'll explain what the experience is like. She's like, it feels like someone took me and threw me in the back seat of a car and someone else is driving. And I can't they won't let me come back out kind of thing. So it's a very interesting disorder. But with that being said, those are very dangerous types of they can be very dangerous, right? If you have a psychotic break or you have a manic episode, like a lot of people who are in manic episodes unfortunately will start doing very high risk behaviors, doing drugs, running around, sleeping around. Like, and it's not that they're not even doing it on their full own accord. They're the chemicals in their brain are completely imbalanced. So this is why we put people on medication. You can always discuss with your psychiatrist in a situation like this, hey, I really want to dose down on my medication. Can we explore other ways to manage this? And if you have a psychiatrist who's not willing to do that or whatever, or they're very medication oriented, then do some research
Go to
on your
Hannah.
own. That's funny. I don't have a psychiatric clinic, so y'all can't come to me. But and I can only practice medicine in Michigan. I'm only licensed in Michigan for right now.
Go to
So
Michigan.
go to Michigan and move here. So alongside of Muhammad, you can always just bring research and say, can we try this? Like advocate for yourself. But don't go off medications. Do not listen. This is actually a very important thing. If you are on medications of any sort of like psychiatric medication, do not ever quit cold turkey. Don't just stop it. You can precipitate very serious symptoms if you do that. If a schizophrenic person stops their medications, they will have a psychotic episode 100% because it's affecting the balance of chemicals in your brain very particularly, and it does that over a slow period of time. So if you just stop it, you drop everything very quickly, right? So we wean people off very safely, and a lot of these medications are very safe too.
What if you have, like, for example, what if you're on like the lowest? Because I know when you like start kind of, going down on the dose, if you're already on the lowest dose and you want to stop taking them, can you just stop taking them, or is there a way to do psychiatrists have a way to still kind of take you off of it
Mhm.
even when it's a low dose?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on the medication that you are on. So different ones, we have different tapering methods. So you still want to let your psychiatrist know. Now, if it's like an antidepressant and you're on the lowest dose, like the lowest dose, you can stop. But sometimes you don't know what the lowest dose is because there are doses that are not available to the like for public eye basically,
Mhm.
that we have access to is special order to be able to cut down. So if it was a 5 milligram of something, there might not be a 2.5 milligram, but we can access a liquid formulation that lets you dose down even more. Or we might tell you, okay, break it in half, do
Yeah.
that for 3 more days, and then go off. So just
Okay.
always talk with the person who prescribed the medication to you. They'll let you know.
So one person asked, how do you tell if a problem is a mental disorder or a gin problem?
Mm, Very good question. So, okay, so mental health. Okay, so anytime you think, give me a second to let me think about my answer to this
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, because it's a good question. So I'll let you guys know something interesting enough. I do hijama. So hijama is Islamic cupping. It is, the Prophet ﷺ was told by Jibreel that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, have your ummah try cupping. There's healing in cupping, something along that lines. Maybe I'll look up the hadith for you guys and send it in the chat. But a lot of people come for hijama as a means of treatment for a variety of medical conditions. And I had a patient once who was coming in with the belief that she had black magic on her and she was extremely depressed. She was having trouble getting married. Things were just not going right in her life. And her mom were convinced that this was a jinn issue. And I remember just looking at her, I'm asking her the question. I'm like, this isn't a jinn issue. You are just horribly depressed. And I bet you if we got you on in that level, right, I'd want someone to start medication personally. If we got you on medication just to lift your spirits enough, we could do all the other work to be able to help you. So a lot of times people confuse jinn and mental health. Your best bet is going to be two things. Go see someone who's trained in this to do the assessment, right? And see what's going on. Then two is if you're really concerned, you can always speak to a scholar about this or a sheikh or the imam, and you can do ruqya. Ruqya is a healing. It's healing, right? The idea of ruqya in certain verses and things that you in certain du'as that are read for healing and protection, you can still do that because those help mental health too. So if it ended up being a jinn issue or a mental health issue, technically it will address both. Now, when you think full-blown jinn, like possession, screaming, da da da, I mean, those things are very clearly not psychiatric. If you're someone who is a psych trained professional and you see certain things, you're going to be like, this isn't a psychotic episode. This is something else. So it might not be clear to you guys, but to us who are trained in this, a lot of people obviously don't believe it, but who are trained in this, we can look and be like, yeah, that's not schizophrenia. That's something else. There's something else going on there.
So you feel like you could tell the difference between them?
I can because I have the training in it, right?
Right.
So I can very quickly be like, yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like I wouldn't be.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've seen people. I know somebody that has schizophrenia, and to me, when I saw them experiencing things, I was kind of like, oh, is there somebody here? Because they were talking to somebody.
Yeah. Whereas the whole, and there's, I'll say this too. There's also debate about does jinn possession among scholars, does jinn possession even happen or exist, right? Or is there something else going on that we're missing? Because jinn possession in and of itself is actually not spoken about in the Quran explicitly, and the hadith literature on it is very small. So there's kind of debate even among those scholars. But the thing about it is, when you hear the stories of jinn possession, it's not that they're talking to someone else, it's that someone else is speaking from them. And this is different than dissociative identity disorder because it happens all of a sudden, right? With DID, they've had it for a long time because it was a protective mechanism from abuse for a very long time, usually. Whereas in this case, it's like this person was completely fine, da da da, and all of a sudden they're speaking. I remember someone they were telling me there was this girl who they believed to be possessed, who they wanted to bring to me for hijama. And I remember sitting there like, how did I get here? How did I get to this situation in my life where I am doing exorcisms? And I remember they were trying to get her to go, and they believed the jinn in her, this is what they believed, was saying, if you take her out of this house, I am going to hurt her. Yeah. And we don't see that in schizophrenia. They don't speak as if they're a second person.
Right.
And it was like they would try to trick her to try to get her to come, and it felt like something would pull her back. Right. And there's stories other people. I mean, Sheikh Walid Baysuni has a story of where he literally saw his friend get thrown against a wall and nothing pushed him right backwards. Like, you can't throw yourself that far. And so or watched him getting really sick, and it was just not a normal sickness, and they did the ruqya, and when he would read Quran, the jinn would start would threaten to hurt the man that he was in because he hated Walid Baysuni's recitation. So there are stories of that. I have one experience I can tell you guys about. Yeah, you guys get story time today. So again, this is a hijama thing. This is just aside from my trauma work, but I had a woman come, right? And this woman, she's Muslim, but she's not practicing. Like she was tatted up completely, like all her back, born Muslim, right? And she was like, I just wanted to do hijama. I heard it was something good. I was like, oh, okay, let's do it. And then she goes to me, hey, I heard that hijama helps with black magic. Does it help, like, if you have black magic on you? And I was like, yeah, it is used for that. And she's like, okay. And then she starts explaining to me what's been going on. She's like, yeah, since I was really young and she was from Lebanon. She was like, I had visited Lebanon and I accidentally like stepped into over a black magic. I don't know what it's called, like emblem that was
I
intended.
definitely
Yeah,
doesn't know.
yeah.
I definitely don't know.
That was intended for someone else. So it was intended for someone else, but she stepped over, and so it went to her, basically. That's kind of like how, and now there were issues where she would start having nightmares about a jinn, and eventually she started seeing him. And there would be times where he would be at her window. And she would say there was a specific surah that if she played the surah, I know, she played the surah, it went away. And I was like, okay, so let's play Quran as we're doing the hijama, and I'll come and check on you and everything. So I play Surah Baqarah. Surah Baqarah is known for its healing properly. So I'm playing it. And I leave, and then I come back, and the surah has changed. And I look at her, and I'm like, why did you change it to this surah? She's like, this is a surah he hates. And all of a sudden, she is writhing in pain. She is like, when I say writhing, like I'm looking at her like, what is going on? Her hand starts turning, like literally pointing, and it's like something is pulling her hand, and you could see I literally am watching the veins pop out of her hand, out of her arm. Okay, as she's pointing, and she's feeling like something's pulling, and da da da. I'm like grabbing her hand and pushing it down. We're reading Quran on her, doing Ruqya on her, and then her arm starts doing this, and I'm like, if this arm points at me, I'm fighting someone. Girl, because I was like, you came in here, you didn't tell me what this was about. I thought I was just doing this for back pain or something. And subhanAllah, her arm literally was moving to the point that I thought her shoulder was going to dislocate.
Oh
And
my
that was
goodness.
the only time that I ever really was like, okay, I think this might be a jinn thing. Yeah, that's a fun story for you guys.
Wow. I would I would have been like, good luck
Yeah.
with that.
I
Bye.
really someone said something funny. They said Hannah became a ghostbuster. I really did become a ghostbuster.
Also, I do want to point this out. Yeah, when you guys see me doing like this, is because I did put my dog outside. Because if not, he was gonna be barking. But I left a cup or two outside, and he's like destroying them.
That's too funny. Yeah. I don't someone's asking which verse did her jinn hate. I don't remember. It was a specific surah. It was just one and it wasn't it was just a random surah. It wasn't like one that we know to be particular for Ruqya. It just hated that surah. And yeah, it was in her house. And I mean, she even told the story of like she had a dream that when she was in Lebanon, she had a dream that Allah said that in 3 days something bad was going to happen, like to her. She kept having a dream, like it was a warning. And then she went to a sheikh, and they said, okay, stay home for the next 3 days, like don't be going out. And she didn't listen. She went and climbed a mountain. Lebanon has a lot of mountains, so she was climbing, and she said something pushed her off, and she literally, yeah, and she fell down the mountain and like broke a bunch of bones, ended up in the hospital. And I was like, geez.
Girl, I would have stayed home.
Yeah, alhamdulillah that she's okay. And we asked her, like, did it do anything? She's like, yeah, I haven't had it after the ruqya and the cupping. She hadn't had issues for a few months. I was like, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Y'all got me ghost busting and exercising demons over here without my permission. Someone asked, how do you treat addictions?
Yes.
Let's talk about it. This is a book that I'd like for you guys to
I love
look
how
at.
ready you are.
I literally have it on my I'm so bad at reading books, you guys. When I read books, I literally get to the end. Like I'll get to the last chapter and then never finish it. It's like I have trouble committing or something. But this book is called Dopamine Nation. It is by Dr. Anna Lemke. She is an addiction specialist. And I can't answer how to treat addiction is just such a overwhelming question because there's so many types of addiction.
really quick. I'm
Yeah.
gonna let you talk to them and explain this really quick. I have to step to the side for my
To make
dog
sure
really quick.
make
Yep.
sure your dog doesn't tear up your house.
Yep.
No problem. So it'll just be me and you guys. So bismillah. So I'll give you a gist of it. There are so many different types of addictions. There's drug addiction, right? There's gambling addictions, addiction to substances, and there's addictions to activities. It's how I can kind of break it up. When it comes to addictions to substances, because there is actually a chemical going into your body you're ingesting or you're injecting, affecting your neurochemistry, the way we approach that can be a little different because we can actually use certain other medications to blunt the ability of the drug that you're injecting or ingesting for addiction, blunt its ability to have an effect. So, for example, if someone's addicted to alcohol, there is a medication that we can use that will not allow the alcohol to give them the buzz, right? Now, someone has to take the medication for it to work. If someone is addicted to heroin or opioids, there's a medication we can give them that doesn't allow for those drugs to attach to the receptors, so they don't get a buzz. They don't get the high, right? With that being said, addiction is not just chemical in nature, it's also very much psychological. So people can really struggle to keep up with the medication regimen. So dopamine nation is all about the fact that dopamine is the chemical that is our pleasure chemical and our motivation chemical. When we are addicted to anything, what we're basically doing is we're chasing the dopamine high. We're doing something, and as a result, it spikes our dopamine level to a point that it gets us addicted. There are a bunch of methods, but all of them are addressing the dopamine spike. So we're teaching people how do you modulate your trigger. So the thing that makes you want to use, right? Is it stress that makes you want to use? Think people who smoke cigarettes, right? Is it when you are anxious that you want to use? Is it because of severe trauma in your life that you fell into addiction? Not felt like people do it intentionally, but in essence, you're using it as a cover to your pain. And then addressing those underlying things, plus the person having a big enough why they want to heal from their addiction, and then all these other medications and things we can use to help assist. Does that make sense?
The
So
part that I
you
heard,
treat,
yes.
yeah. So some addictions you can treat completely by yourself. There are people who I know who were able to leave certain addictions. A lot of them were activity-based addictions, like watching certain things, if you get my drift. But with a lot of the drug addictions, we have addiction clinics for that reason, because it's just it can be really hard because it's the chemical effect.
Somebody also asked, if you take sleeping pills, do you end up becoming over reliant on them?
If you take sleeping pills, do you become over reliant on them? It depends on the sleeping pill. There are different types of medications. Benzodiazepines, for example, is a very common, it used to be very commonly prescribed. It's an anti-anxiety medication and a sedative. It also can help you sleep, but they are extremely addictive, extremely addictive. So it is not all too common that we see it being prescribed. Also, it has a brain effect long term. Then there are medications that are not addictive and very safe, like trazodone, for example. There are over-the-counter medications you can take, generic form of Benadryl, basically. I wouldn't recommend you do that for long periods of time because we do show that it's associated with Alzheimer's risk. But what was I going to say? Yeah. There are other very safe supplements you can use, which I will recommend if you're struggling with sleeping. So if you're struggling with sleeping, first and foremost, go see your doctor just to make sure it's not something else, sleep apnea affecting your sleep, especially if you are someone who's overweight. Make sure you get that checked out, because a lot of times that's the reason and people don't know it. And sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, can increase your stroke risk. It does increase your stroke risk, heart attack risk, blood pressure, diabetes risk. It's not a good thing. So that's one. If you're thin and it's mainly just maybe you have a hard time getting yourself to sleep, but once you're asleep, you're okay, you can use magnesium glycinate. I'll send it. It's a supplement. It is very safe. Our body needs
I heard
magnesium.
that was also really good for depression.
It is very good for depression. It is one of my favorite supplement recommendations because we need it. Most of us are deficient in it, and it is important for neurologic function, your function of your brain and your muscles. It helps with cramping. It helps with depression. It helps with anxiety. It helps with sleep. Take that at nighttime. It is completely safe. It is a great supplement. Okay. You can also take melatonin if you want. Just take it an hour before you sleep. Melatonin is a hormone we naturally release, and this just gives a little bit of a spike. I would not recommend it for a long-term fix. You can do it for a month or two, but then after that, switch over to magnesium glycinate, work on your sleep hygiene, the things you do before sleeping to help you come down. Don't be on your phone. Make sure that you're like not doing heavy or thinking or working right before you go to sleep. Yeah. Don't have a TV in your room if you can avoid it. Did I call you out?
I had to take mine out of my
Yeah.
room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Another question. Can you control your thoughts?
That's a really awesome question. So give me 1 second as I just want to write something down.
Go ahead.
So yes and no. This is a little complicated. There are certain thoughts that are automatic thoughts, right? They come up and you don't even have time to process the fact that you thought, right? At any given time, it's like we have 1,000 thoughts at once. It's just the ones we're focusing on. So while you can't always control what comes to in your subconscious, what you can control is what you focus on, right? So we call these automatic negative thoughts, right? Because they're automatic. Dr. Daniel Amen, who's a psychiatrist, calls them ants, A-N-T, ants. It's cute. And so if you are experiencing a negative thought and it comes to mind, what you can do is automatically, like when it comes to mind, you go into the place of, okay, is this true? How true is it? And what can I do to make it better? So if I sit here and I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing so horrible. If the automatic negative thought, I'm doing horrible at this podcast, right? If I let that continue, my confidence is going to dwindle. My articulation is going to dwindle. I'm going to have a harder time thinking of what I need to say because I'm so paranoid and anxious that people are going to comment negatively, whatever, right? That thought can come to mind, and our brain is so multifaceted. I can be talking to you and still talking to myself in my head. And I can say, no, I'm not doing horribly. This is my expertise. I'm doing the best I can. And at the end of the day, when it's done, right? So how true is it? It's not that true. And if it was true, what can I do to make it less true? Let me take a second to clarify my thoughts. That's how you control your thinking. And our brain operates on patterns. Our brain is a series of neural connections. There are nerves, which are the brain cells that send signals that are electric and chemical. And then from one nerve to another, it's like, okay, from one nerve to another. And basically, the more this communicates to this, the stronger the connection gets. You can't get rid of a connection once it's there. You can weaken it, meaning you can not activate this. So what we can do, this is a negative thought. Let's say I have negative thought. I feel bad about myself, right? What I can do is instead create a new connection. I have negative thought. I give myself positive self-talk. I have a negative thought. I tell myself that it's not true. I have a negative thought. I say Alhamdulillah instead. You strengthen these new connections, and then this one weakens, and eventually it doesn't become your automatic anymore. That's how you control your thoughts. That's the neurobiology behind it.
So see, when I was a Christian and I would go to pray,
Mhm.
I always used to get these like random, like intrusive thoughts middle of prayer. Now, as a Muslim, I actually haven't gotten those, which is weird because I feel like it's not weird, but at the same time, I do think it's weird because I don't say my prayers like out loud. So
Mhm.
it's like when I'm doing, since I'm saying it all like quietly and I'm doing like the motions, like nothing like I'm focused on my prayer. But when I was a Christian, I used to be praying and like some crazy things would like pop into my mind. I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
That
do
was
that.
not that's not what I meant. That's not what I'm saying. Let me focus. Yeah, and you'll notice as as you progress in your Islamic journey, that's probably going to start happening again with Salah, because eventually, once we get so used to something, I know we lose it, and that's a process of khushu'. Is that we need to learn how to refocus, recenter. And I mean, I think about myself with Salah, right? I try to use Salah as my calming anchor and be super focused. I literally will like do deep breaths before I'm praying. I'll like try to slow my recitation down. And I'm busy. I come home from work. I'm practicing medicine. All this stuff is in my head. I have stuff to do. And it's very easy for me, like when I'm praying for the thoughts to come in, what I need to do, da da da. And it's literally the thing about khushu', which is your focus in salah, that's the word for it, is it's actually not that you're perfectly focused. It's that anytime your focus is distracted, you zero back in, right? And so I'll do that. I'll try to focus on what I'm saying. And salah is a really great tool for your mental well-being if you don't let yourself lose the things that you're supposed to be doing in it.
Wow. Okay.
And someone was asking this, they said that's it's a sweet he or she said, will this new series be you and Hannah? This has been awesome. Inshallah, yes, it'll just be us two.
Yes, and actually, I was gonna use that to kind of promote our next one. So our next live is actually going to be a mock session. So we're gonna have like a little therapy session on
Yeah.
live.
Yeah, so you guys get to kind of watch what does it look like to do a trauma processing session. And this isn't necessarily how the trauma coaching goes because there's a lot of education that goes into it, but just a sense of things to look out for, take note of, and some methods of how to process trauma. And you'll see how I approach and how I talk about it. It's very different than what you would expect. I'm not going to ask Rosy to tell her story right out loud, which is what talk therapy is, because that actually worsens your trauma because it sends your
I remember we talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it'll be inshallah a good time. And hopefully we can find a time that works a little better for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So are there any signs that individuals can notice that can indicate that they might be struggling with a mental health issue like themselves?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So the prime thing that we use to determine whether or not something is affecting someone mentally, it's very, very simple. Is it affecting your day-to-day functioning? And people know it. Like if I can't sleep, right? And it's because I'm thinking about something over and over again, something stressing me out. That's how you know, because it's disrupting your daily function. I can't focus at work. My relationships are being affected. So that is your prime indicator that you're struggling with something mentally. And if you're not, or maybe you're able, like sometimes there's something disrupting, but I'm able to get right back to it. It's fine. That's just regular stress, and we all are going to deal with stress.
Right. We life brings on stress.
Yeah.
Usually, but
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions that anybody may have, please do send them. I know somebody did ask, how did my son pass? He passed away from SIDS, which is sudden infant death syndrome. But yes, that was about 4 years ago. Anything that you would like to add on? Any advice that you may have if anybody's seeking mental health or anything like that?
Okay, let me see. Yeah. Let me think of something exciting to share with you guys.
And guys, we have about like 15 more minutes because she does have some other stuff that she needs to take
I
care
have my
of.
coaching session right after this with my ladies. So, alhamdulillah.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
If you
yeah,
guys
I
have any
think
questions, send them in.
yeah, if you have questions or anything, get them in these last 10 minutes. But I'll share something that was so I was telling Rosie, I was on a podcast yesterday, the Mad Mem Luke's podcast. The episode was really good. It's very long, but it was like intense. We talked a lot about biohacking. We talked about neurophysiology, the anatomy and physiology of trauma, how it affects our body. And I made mention, right? The Prophet ﷺ had experienced a number of traumatic events in his life. And someone got really upset in the comments that I had said that. And I actually spent 2 years studying the seerah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So I'm pretty familiar with that, alhamdulillah. With that being said, I think it is very easy for us to dismiss the importance of something and the science behind something because we associate it with something upsetting. And the reality of it is that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam is the model for humanity. So it's no what's the word I'm looking for? It's no wonder that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam to experience such difficulty in his life, because the Quran tells us that we're going to experience difficulty in our life. And so here is a model of how we cope with it. And now, as research is coming out and we actually can scan people's brains and draw people's blood, and we can see what is the real physiological effect these certain activities are having on a person, we can substantiate it in a certain way. So when I talk about somatic sensory processing, which is basically a major, it is the way in which we have people process trauma. I say it's reverse engineering the nervous system, right? When you're traumatized, your nervous system, your brain is going haywire, and it's saying, hey, this thing that we experienced was so horrible, we're not going to even put it into long-term memory. We're going to treat it like it's happening right now to protect you, so that if something comes to you that resembles what happened, you're going to start freaking, your heart's going to start racing, your mind's going to start going, your hands are going to start sweating. That's the effect. And it's happening because our brain has a primary responsibility to protect our survival. So this is its way of protecting our survival, because it thinks this thing's going to hurt us. And so it's like the whole idea of, like, if you're walking and you see a bear, you're not going to sit there and think, is that a bear? What kind of bear is it? No, you're going to run, right? Lots of things are bears to our brain. Abuse from people, emotional or physical, things that we think are going to isolate us are the bears. So that's just how our brain works. And what we learned is, because the nervous system goes haywire and doesn't process it correctly, then treats it like it's happening again, then our body responds, because the brain body connection, like I mentioned earlier. If we can reverse engineer that, meaning we can bring the trauma without us experiencing it in real life, if we can bring it slightly to the front of our minds in a safe way that doesn't like overwhelm us, and then do certain activities to show the nervous system, hey, you're okay, you're safe, this isn't really happening. We can process it, take it from short-term memory to long-term memory, take it from what's our limbic system. It's a part of our brain that's the emotional part of our brain. It's the one that's associated with fear and anxiety, and it's right next to the memory center of our brain. It's really cool. We take it from there to long-term memory. And then that way, now you understand this thing happened. It sucked. It hurts to think about, but it no longer can rule my present, because my brain understands this is not a safety issue anymore. This isn't a bear. This is just a hard thing that I went through, but I made it through. And that is it. And so the Prophet did experience significant trauma, and no one can deny that. I mean, you're talking death of mother and father and uncle and grandfather and wife and sons, and his daughters all died except for one before him, and he witnessed war, and he had friends who died, and he was kicked out of his home, in essentially like having to deal with a refugee community that now no longer had. Some Muslims couldn't even go back to get their children. I can't remember, I think it was Sedema had her child ripped out of her arms when she was trying to migrate from Mecca to Medina. Like, that is trauma. And the Muslims of that time, the way they coped is Allah showed them things that they never understood how it was affecting their brain and their body and their soul. But he showed those things, and now we can study those things and understand exactly how it works. So when I say the Prophet was the Prophet experienced traumatic experiences, and he processed them through Salah and his tahajjud. And if you guys are interested in all of like the specifics of that, the Mad Memluks podcast episode from yesterday is there, and I talk all about it in detail and all of that. But me saying that he processed it during Salah, like, that's truly what it is. And now we can use that same science and adapt it to dua, and adapt it to what you do when you're breathing and driving. There are lots of different ways to process, but it all is through the same thing: reverse engineering your nervous system.
Somebody asked, strange question, does the hijab change a lady's mind over time?
I'm not exactly. Do you mean mind or brain? Like, I would say in this way, right? So anything that we do that's kind of a substantial imagery change for us does very much affect something called our self-concept. It's a psychological thing. So in the sense that, yeah, when you wear hijab, because hijab is such a physical outward expression of something, it is going to over time affect your self-concept, your understanding of yourself. It is aligned with certain values, so your values are probably going to shift to meet up with that. Otherwise, you're going to have a constant friction. So I would say, yeah, it definitely does change over time. Just as if someone even didn't wear, let's say someone wasn't Muslim and they didn't wear hijab, but like they decided to dress more modestly, their behavior is also going to be modified to align
I
with
think
those
any change really does that, because, for example, for me, like, yes, I started wearing my hijab, and obviously But I started wearing my hijab also right when I converted to Islam. So I don't know if the changes is just because I converted to Islam, and I accepted Islam, or it's because of the whole modesty thing. But I also did notice, like, anytime before, I would always like dye my hair.
Mhm.
And so anytime that I would change my hair, it was like a different.
New personality. That's literally like a new personality. Oh, that's so
Yeah,
funny. It really
exactly.
is. It really is. Yeah. And and
And
and
same
this
thing,
is
like if you have curly hair and then you straighten it.
same thing. Yeah.
Yep.
And this is actually a fun fact about mental health things. W- We're actually trained that, like, if a patient comes in and we see a sudden change in their appearance, a psychiatric appearance, we and not something like my hair was black and I dyed it brown or blonde, but like my hair is now red or green, like something very out of the ordinary. It automatically raises a red flag to us, like, what was did something happen that made them feel that they need to adopt a new identity to cope with it, right? And
Oh, I
it's
feel
like
like
the
my
whole
therapist. I feel bad for my therapist. I've brought so many red flags to my therapist.
he was probably like, "This girl's going through it." But, yeah, it's like the sudden I don't know that example, right? Britney Spears. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Britney Spears because 'cause y'all are young, but, um, Britney Spears, right, when she shaved her head bald, that was the start of her psychotic break. Now there are a lot of women who shave their head, like, do a buzz cut, right, as just a stylistic thing. I don't think that's haram, by the way, because yeah, fun fact. Did you do it?
So no. So like I said, I used to dye my hair a lot. And
Oh,
so yeah, and so the thing was, since I used to dye my hair so much, all of my
the
curls were
damage.
like yeah, they were just damaged. So I was like, I want my curls back. So I kind of like just I had like a little bit though, like up
Oh,
here.
you did a no, you did a big chop. That's, different. But, like, the whole shaving just for the stylistic aspect of it because it
Right.
resembles a man is not allowed. Now, if you're someone who's dealing with chemotherapy for cancer treatment, hair's falling out, that's fine, you can shave your head. But, yeah, so that being said, we do definitely keep an eye out on that, and yeah, that's what I got for you.
And then last question. Somebody said, how to deal with stress. General tips.
Very good. I'm gonna give you the tips that you're not gonna find on the stress article. So you can always Google like they're gonna tell you relaxation techniques, manage your schedule, and all that. And that's really good advice. One thing a lot of people don't think about that can be a huge contributor to managing stress is your phone and specifically social media. Because social media is has such a high number of stimuli, meaning things that are popping up that your brain has to pay attention to, it can actually really screw up your stress modulation. And so with that being said, if you find yourself in a place where you're more anxious than normal and you're more stressed than normal, I really recommend for people to do a social media detox or a social media fast, even if it's just for a week. And look, I want you to notice a difference in your mental well-being. This is something I used to always do. I can't do it anymore because now I have a social media presence that I have to keep up with. But my personal social media, my private social media, I do it for. So that's probably tip number one. Tip number two is be mindful of what you're eating. If you eat more of a high carb type of diet, because you get such strong blood sugar spikes and crashes, that actually will make you feel very tired. And tiredness affects stress, your ability to cope with stress a lot. Uh, if you are stressed, hungry, if you are hungry, tired, or angry, those are all times where your ability to handle stress is, like, just blown away, right? It's gone. So,
Yeah.
you have to work extra hard. So, try to avoid those situations. So, with what you're doing and how you arrange your sleep schedule and, how you arrange your meals and the kind of food you're eating so that it's giving you longer bursts of energy, so higher protein, higher fat, healthy fats. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I got to make sure I work on those. Especially
It
on my
takes
eating.
time.
My eating habits are just so bad. Like I'll just forget to eat. Like I get so
Mm.
busy during the day, I forget to eat. It's
I
really bad.
got you. I remember we talked about that and I was like, "Girl, you gotta work on it." 'Cause your hormone levels are connected to the food too. As women, for us specifically, because we operate on a monthly hormone cycle, our energy levels and, like, the way our body decides what hormone to produce is actually determined by our caloric caloric intake, so how many calories we're taking in. So you have to be extra careful about it.
Gotta work on that.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we have come to the end of our live. Like I said, we are planning to do a mock session for our next episode of Mind, Iman, and Mental Health. So make sure you guys follow Hannah, because we don't know yet if it's going to be on her channel or mine. We haven't actually decided. But inshallah, it happens.
Inshallah.
Yes. So make sure that you guys follow her. In the title of this video, I did put her YouTube at, so you guys can look her up. So yes, follow her. Make sure to like this video, comment, subscribe to both, and I will see you guys in our next video. And may Allah always be in your corner.
I'm going to jump in real quick to say I was replying to some comments on the live. So you can always, that's also my, I don't know, that's me, by the way, guys. That was me, actually. No, I don't have an assistant or anything who's commenting. I just multitask. And if you guys are interested in anything else I do, like Rosy mentioned, I do have a channel. And if there's a lady who's watching this who's interested in the trauma group coaching, please, any of my videos, if you click, there's always in the description. One last thing, which I always forget to plug, but I have a newsletter. And if you sign up for the newsletter, you get 2 free ebooks that I wrote. One is on trauma healing, and the other is on God conscious self-improvement. It's sent to you immediately. And my newsletter is basically the way that I am able to communicate all the things that I'm doing to like a really close audience. So,
and where do we find this newsletter?
All of it is always in every description of my video. So go to any of my most recent video that have been posted and just click the description. It'll be there.
Awesome. I got to do that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. And I will see you guys in our next video. May Allah always be in your corner. Bye, guys. Walaikum salam.